Club members. So this will be the second lecture for the design lectures. I'm giving you a slideshow template, which I'll share in Discord after this lecture is posted. Basically, you can work with any game, but over the development process, over time, you'll probably be needing to get back to this and recall what you want on your design, what you design to be on the game. So this slideshow will just go over everything that should be on your game and how you should design it. And yeah, try structuring it exactly like this. You can make a copy of this slide for those who are in the design team. You can make a copy of this slideshow and design a game for us to work with. And we'll vote on, depending on how many people make the game, or not make the game, make the design. We'll vote on which one's the best design and we'll start working along with that. We got to keep into account several things while we work throughout this year for our club, one of which includes time constraints as well as resource constraints. So just take this into account while making this slideshow. But yeah, so the first slide I have here is the core gameplay, which we went over in the previous lecture, or in this slide, have like a basic overview of the game, like what this game will be about, and what will be on it, basically just overarching info of the game. Also have like the genre, would it be a platformer, puzzle, action, RPG, shooter, etc. And take into account also what platform this game will be played on. Will it be on PC? If it is on PC, we'll likely upload it on itch.io. If it's on console, which is a whole different story and a lot more complicated, but take into account, once again, like I said, the resource constraints we have, it's most likely we'll be working on a PC or mobile game, because that's the easiest to set up with Unity. But just take that into account, put that in the slideshow, or put that in this slide, and then have the mechanics. So some basic mechanics include player controls, the core mechanics, which are like the primary actions, as well as some secondary actions, which are just some miscellaneous features that may help support, the core mechanics of the game, things that the player can do. Of course, as you all know, player controls, it's how the player interacts with the game. List all the actions the player will be capable of doing, such as running, jumping, shooting, flying, things like that. All the player's abilities. Maybe the player may gain new abilities over time, so you can add that as new abilities to be gained would be such and such, and then have some core mechanics, which are just the primary actions. For this, I gave some examples. This includes combat, exploration, puzzle solving, just basic general overarching things that the player can do. This doesn't have to be things that the player may gain over time because for one, core mechanics it uh, is not the same thing as, something else that the player can do, which is the definition of secondary mechanics like crafting. This is just things that the player can always do. The player can roam around the house, maybe if you have a home in the game, or the player can always combat or puzzle solve or do something like that. Just have a set of core mechanics that the player can do. Then we also have something called secondary mechanics, which I kind of briefly went over, but I'll go over it again. It's just additional features that support those core mechanics. Like I said, crafting is an example of this. There's also something that's common in a lot of games called skill progression. As you keep doing something like mining, in RuneScape, usually your mining level tends to increase and you can upgrade your skill level. So things like that, just secondary mechanics. The main thing you should take into put in this slide are the player controls, which are things that the player can do, as well as the core mechanics. Secondary mechanics is more of an optional thing you guys can add to this slide, but um, have the first two points. The next slide I have here is titled Objective. So what is this slide about? It's basically what you want the player to accomplish. That's the main objective. So once they reach a goal, that could be a, you know, secondary objective. We can have like a reach goal and then it has to defeat a final boss. Some other goals can be defeat enemies or solve puzzles, etc. Things like this just have to uh, be put in a game design document pitch, which is what this is, to help those who are trying to make the game understand what they're making. So have the main objective here. What do you want the player to accomplish overall? If it's a big game, maybe you want them to beat a final boss or things like that. Maybe solve a final puzzle to get someone freed from, prison or something, just things like that. I'm just giving examples off the top of my head. Use your creativity for this because that's the main thing that this pitch will train you guys on. Also have some challenges, which are like the obstacles that slow down the player from reaching that main objective. Um, this can be enemies, this can be just physical obstacles. Like if you're making a runner game, you can have you know, a rock obstacle blocking the player from, reaching the goal of maybe running infinitely or just, escaping a cop or something. I'm talking Subway Surfers. Just examples like this take into account. So have obstacles that prevent the player from achieving that objective. That way, the game is more fun and challenging, and it will actually um, retain the player's attention. It will keep the player's attention and keep them engaged while they play throughout the game. Make sure there's a set of balance to it. Make sure it's not too difficult to get past these challenges. Uh, and yeah, but don't make it too easy though. Something about these challenges is make it have it exactly balanced. If it's exactly achievable, then that will be far more fun than if it's too easy or too hard. Next slide I have here is the game world and setting. This is kind of self-explanatory, but talk about, what the environment in the game world will be like. Will it be a forest, a futuristic city? Is it underwater? Just things like that to take into account. There's also the level design, which if you guys are making multiple levels for your game, will it be, linear, meaning once you complete this level, you'll go to the next level, or, will it be open world, which is it's all on the same level, but you will be able to progress throughout that same open world as you explore it? Or will it be a mixture of both? Just things like that to take into account. How will the levels be designed? Um, and then we also have something called art style, and this is for basically if you're part of the design team and you're making the slideshow, what this is you're actually setting up the assets that the art team will be making. Um, and how will they make this? You'll first have to describe the visual style of the game. So will it be 2D pixel art or realistic 3D models, 3D modeling softwares which we have to use? Just describe that. What will we be using, or will it be both? Maybe you're just making 2D pixel art for sprite animations or UI, and then you're making the actual 3D game using models from Blender or Maya or something like that. Just have this set up so that, it's easy for us to understand what we're making. And then I have something called story and characters. This slide is far more optional than the other slides purely because, some games like, Geometry Dash or Subway Surfer, they don't have like a full story. They don't have like a background, or they don't have much lore to it. That's, directly obvious to the player. Geometry Dash, you just try completing the levels, and honestly, I don't think there's any lore as far as I know. Things like that. And then we have large time games like Mortal Kombat or God of War, games like that that have a lot of plot and lore behind it. Um, so once again, I'm telling you to take into account the time constraints. If you are making a story-based game, if you are designing one, make sure it's not a large story, large enough for the player, to like have to figure it out themselves. Make sure it's easy to understand and, um, easy to get for those who are also making the game. But yeah, of course, the main character, who does the player control? What are their abilities and goals? What's their backstory? And then we also have supporting side characters, which can be like non-player characters, just companions helping the player throughout the game. And then we have something called a progression system. I have a slide on this too. So we have two things. I have two things here called levels and the difficulty curve. So how does the player progress throughout the game? Will they level up? Will they, unlock abilities, gain experience, get armor, th just things like that. What does each level, maybe in other words, what does each level grant the player as they, progress throughout the game? What's their reward for making it this far throughout in the game you're making. Just take that into account as you're making it. What do you want the player to be rewarded with? Or maybe you want the difficulty to be harder, which is this next point I have here called difficulty curve. Um, how will the difficulty increase over time? Just think about these things when you're making a progression system. How will, the player progress throughout the game? What happens as they progress? Will there be like harder challenges along the way? Will there be more companions to assist the player? Or maybe it could be a mix of both. Things like that to take into account. So think of progression system, like what happens as they level up or progress or unlock abilities, things like that. Now, this is more general, but this is the target audience, which I went over in the last slide or last lecture as well. What age group are you designing this game for? Is it for teens, kids, adults? Maybe it's all of them. And difficulty type is what I have as my next part. Will it be a casual, a competitive? I actually meant player type on this. That's my bad. This is like what type of player do you want to, play the game? Would it be a casual, non-competitive player, or do you want like a really competitive um person who loves winning, or could it be a mix of both? If you are making a game meant for competitive players, preferably think of the genre you're making as well, such as shooter games. Those tend to be very competitive. But if you're making a casual, game, it's the game you're probably making would be more open world. So things like that are just genres you should take into account what type of game you're making. All of these should work well together, all these slides. Like if we go over, all of these, um, we should make sense of it. Like, okay, it's a genre. Okay, the genre is, let's say, shooter. Then we should go throughout the objective of what does the player need to accomplish. They need to get a victory royale or something like that. The challenges are the other players, or supporting characters, or uh, I don't know, just NPCs helping you. And levels would be you gain experience, things like that. They should all go along together. And the player type you can see is competitive for shooter games. Just make sure it all aligns well. That way it makes sense and it's the perfect design for us, to view and, maybe work on. But yeah, this is just the target audience. Now, this is more optional if we want to make money. But this last slide I have here is monetization, but that's if it's applicable. I have two things here that you do not need to understand as it's likely that we won't be, you know, monetizing our games. So, for example, the business model is will the player be, or will the game be free to play? Would it be a premium purchase? Would it have in-app purchases? And could it also have like other additional content like DLCs, which are additional features? Are there plans for DLCs, microtransactions, or cosmetics that may cost real money? Just things like that, that you may need to also take note of. We'll likely not be needing this slide, but I just put it here just in case you guys do want to do something like this, but it's highly unlikely. I actually don't recommend doing this because it might take more time to have like in-app purchases and have transactions set from our game world to the real world, make money off of that. We just want to make something free, but just think about this, the resources we have available as well as our time constraints. So that's why I'm just putting this slideshow in the first place, or putting this slide in the first place. Now, this next thing is called sound and music. Sound effects, self-explanatory, what, sound effects you want in the game. Maybe for the player actions, you have several sound effects. So running, jumping, flying, explosions, things like that, or maybe shooting sound effects. Um, or enemy grunt sound effects, just things like that to make note of. You will be actually, and the point of this is to have the music team make this for us. You're really just telling the music team what to do based on this, and it really helps, everyone, working on the game together understand what they're making. So have the sound SFX, as we call it, on this slide, have everything you want on it so that you don't have to like add last minute changes. You don't have to like confuse the music team. Maybe they won't know what they're making purely because you didn't have this slide. So make sure to have this slide. And then we also have music slide or music style, which is the kind of soundtrack the game will be having. So will it be orchestral? Will it be electronic? Will it be atmospheric? In our previous game, we had more of a atmospheric game, atmospheric style for our music, purely because it was open world. So, like I said, all of these slides should blend well together and make sense, so that forms the perfect design. So make sure you take all of these into account. Um, and I think that's it for this slide. Now, timeline and milestones. If you guys can, try making a timeline of what you want on the game, what you want to be made and achieved. It's most likely that we may be working on this, us officers, but if you guys want, make a timeline and have some milestones here and there so that we know what we're making. I have two things here called development phases and key milestones. So what are the development phases? Well, that includes pre-production, prototype, alpha, beta, and final release. It's just a breakdown of the project timeline, what you want done in each of these stages or phases. And then we also have key milestones. You can set important deadlines for key features to be added or components to be added to the project. Um, this is, of course, kind of optional too. I do recommend doing this if you guys really want to have a role in this club while we make our game. But this is, once again, I'm not, forcing it. But yeah, I think that's it for this slide. And next we have challenges and risks. But this is not the type of challenge you may be thinking of. It's actually more on the real life side of things, which is potential issues that you may be running into as you make the game. So make sure to identify any risks or challenges in the development process, maybe technical limitations, art creation, time management, as I said, resource management, just all these potential issues so that we can understand how to perhaps modify our design process as we make the game, um, so that it all goes in your favor. If you do not have any potential risks or issues, that is not a good sign because um, well, all you're saying is your design is perfect. And I'll say this, and I'll say this 100 times, but no design is ever perfect. All, design pitches they will have some imperfection as as you go throughout the design process. So make sure to identify what the potential issues are so that we know what to do once we identify those issues and work along with them. Um, and then we also have a contingency plan, which I just said. How do you plan to address these challenges? Once you do these, once you list the potential issues, how do you plan to address them? Maybe us officers may add on a couple of things on how we plan to address the challenges you mentioned in your slideshow. But yeah, these are just things to take into account. Make sure this is like a required slide to do if you are part of the design team and making the design for us. I'll just quickly go over all the slides you need. Um, I'll just go over that right after I finish this slideshow, but yeah, then we have the conclusion, which is just you summarizing what the game concept is, what your vision is, why you want to make this. Um, and we also have something called call to action. If this is a pitch, which it likely will be, just include the next steps, maybe looking for feedback or, uh, you know, this is more general terms, but maybe if you're making a game that has in-app purchases, you probably need funding for your prototype, but just things to take into account. And that's it for the slideshow. Now I'll quickly go over all the slides you need. So core gameplay is essential. So I'll just say R for required. Um, Next to all the slides that are required. What? I'll just have that. Mechanics are also required. Um, I'll just type this. Have the core mechanics, player controls. This one is optional, but try including this. It's not as optional as you think, but it's still not necessary. And then the objective is also required. Game setting is required. Now, story and characters, this is optional, but try involving, you know, what we're playing as, who the character is. Um, that is also not required really if you don't have a story, but this is a completely optional slide. You don't need either of these. The player can, for all we know, the player can be any random person in the story, so maybe it won't matter. This is essential to our design, so this is also required. Target audience required. We want to know who we're making this game for. This is optional. Just put optional next to it. This is 100% required, adds atmosphere to the game, so tell the music team what they'll be making, so that it's easier to understand for everyone. This is more optional, but I highly re like recommend doing it. This is 100% required. If let's just say you didn't even uh put some of these slideshows, that's fine. But if you didn't, it's this slide is probably one of the most important slides as because it helps us identify issues uh to that we can work with along the design. So make sure you have this. This is one of the highest priorities. Do not forget to add these challenges and risks as we go throughout the development process. Just things like that. This one is optional. You do not need to do a summary because chances are the user or audience or us in this case will just understand what, the game concept is based on everything you have here. But I think that is all for this lecture. I hope you guys understood. Be sure to ask questions because I'll be honest, some of my lectures were not always clear. So just be sure to ask questions if you don't understand anything. You can even ask questions about those Unity lectures that we finished or the previous design lecture or as well as this design lecture. Um, we'll probably start working on our game very soon. I also have the in-person meeting slideshow, which I want to quickly go over. So this is our in-person slideshow. I just went over some essential concepts, which we kind of went over in the previous lecture, but for those who weren't able to watch or attend it, this is for the in-person meeting. Now here is what I really want to go over. This is some potential club work we may do if we really are interested, if you guys are interested. So of course this is based on your preference. Now if you open this form, right? If you open this form, asking if you guys want to work on this game jam. So what this game jam is called Games for Change. Um, so if we look at the website here, it's basically like we'll be competing with several other people this coming year for making games that have like some purpose behind it. So maybe you're talking about, so in this case, we have some examples here. These were last year's winners, I believe. It's talking about empathy and mental health, grief. Um, so this brought attention to mental health issues. Will be, and you know, maybe this one, which was also a winner from, actually, this was 2019, sorry. But this is also something that has that addresses some mental health issues. What this Games for Change game jam basically is it's like a game jam where you're making a game which has a societal or meaningful impact. Maybe you're making a game that promotes physical health, so you're making in you're making an infinite runner game that maybe the pickups are healthy pickups, and if you get good pickups like milk or broccoli, that boosts your stamina, then maybe the other bad pickups would slow down your stamina or something like that. Just this Games for Change is really like something we can participate in if you guys are interested to make a societal, maybe worldwide impact. I'm just um kind of summarizing what this thing is. You guys can look into this if you are interested. Uh, I just went over it very briefly. Um, of course, just go over this, but really the first thing you should do is like maybe once you're done reviewing what these things are, submit like the form if you guys do want our club to participate in this. Try submitting this form as soon as possible, as soon as this lecture is uploaded. Um, but yeah, I think that's pretty much it for this lecture. Thank you guys once again, for those who are able to attend. I think that will be it.